Welcome back to the 267th episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through some of the top stories, including how Biden's little inflation narrative is falling apart a bit. An interesting question from Morning Joe is, why do people feel this way about the economy? And the Crooks and Liars article that I'm going to read is breaking it down, but they kind of leave out a really important part. And then our final article will talk about grants going to an atheist organization promoting atheism around the world. That's an interesting one for sure. And of course, we will end today with our daily delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive and ready to take on the day. Now, that's enough rambling from me. Let's jump in to the daily debate. So, when it comes down to your pocketbook, how are you feeling right now? I've asked this before, but as a person who's a little bit younger, I am nicely insulated. I do not have to buy 12 chicken breasts in order to make food for the next week or so every single time I go to the store. I can get smaller portion sizes. I can get just one box of eggs rather than the extra large box of eggs. I can get one thing of milk. As a bachelor, I also just don't have as much food in the house. I'm not as great of a cook. I don't have as many aspirations to be the next Michelin, what is it? I believe it's four-star Michelin chef. So I don't have to necessarily feel it as much as some other people who have families who they're trying to support right now. So if you're a person with a very particular situation, maybe you could throw it in the comment section and say how you're doing. Maybe you're a person who is also, going to Costco and you're getting really good deals and you're not feeling the pinch as much as somebody else. Throw all the perspectives down there, because these first two articles are going to try to highlight the inflation narrative and the inflation reality. And I think that starting off by asking what you guys are feeling right now is even more important than anything that pundits, including myself, can say about it. So, our first article comes from factcheck.org. And honestly, both the first articles are pretty short, and that's going to leave a lot of room for me to do a lot of talking. Then again, how is that different than any other time? I love to hear my own voice because I talk so much in these segments. Then again, that is what a podcast is all about. So let's read the first article, the first paragraph as well of the first article. Quote, when President Joe Biden took office in 2021, the U.S. annual rate of inflation was 1.4%, far from the 9% Biden falsely said in a May 8th interview that he, quote-unquote, inherited. Inflation rose quickly in Biden's first year, but it didn't hit 9% until the 17 months into his presidency. So if you didn't hear the interview he gave, he was saying, I was basically handed an economy where we had 9% inflation, and we've gotten it down. Now, was he handed an economy from the COVID era, from supply chain shocks, from the beginning? And let's be clear, Russia happened underneath, the Russia invasion of Ukraine happened underneath his presidency. But if you wanted to argue that, if you wanted to give him the best interpretation possible, which is he was handed down a situation between Russia and Ukraine that was going to happen anyway underneath Donald Trump, but it just happened to happen underneath Joe Biden, I think you would be remiss to actually make that argument. But let's just give the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, so all of those things were in place, and he was given an economy that was going to see high inflation anyway. Does that mean that the way that he wants to add a whole bunch of spending from the U.S. government to the economy, he is not asking? And let's be clear, technically the Fed operates a little bit independently. Jerome Powell does his own little thing over there, but he can still say to Jerome Powell, hey, we're not afraid of seeing terrible numbers when it comes to unemployment. That's not part of our message. And if you need to come down really hard on interest rates, you need to jack up the interest rates in order to cause a little bit of short-term pain, but bring inflation back down to that 1.7 or that 2% mark, we'd be very happy with that. And he could encourage Jerome Powell down that path. So he has definitely had the chance. He has had the opportunity to not exacerbate it. You could even argue that he has had the chance and the ability, the means to ensure that they recover from these terrible terrible inflation numbers once he's actually at the point where it is at 9%. But to say that, oh, well, hey, yeah, no, I came in and it was already at, 9%. It's just I was handed a really bad economy. No, 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 no. You may have been handed an economy that was on the edge of that anyway. I would give him that much. But how you respond to that economy being on the edge and the things that you were handed, no, that's on you. And guess what? Just take another step back. Let's ask another question. Okay? You were handed something 4 years ago. 4 years ago, you were given something. And you have slightly fixed it. But you have a specific goal in mind. And when you're going to your bosses, say they handed this task to you 4 years ago, and you say, hey, look at my improvement here. And they said, well, hey, your benchmark was actually to get to this particular point. In this case, we were at 9% in that spending. And we told you, hey, we want you to find a way to cut all this down to 2%. You haven't done that yet. Great, you've made progress, but we gave you a deadline, and we wanted you to get there. And guess what? As the president, you also have a deadline, because if you really want to make an argument to the American people that you are recovering from the COVID pandemic, that you are bringing things back in line, bringing it back to 3.6, 3.9%, 3.7 on some days when you're looking at the inflation numbers, that is not the target 2%. That is over half. So basically, if the target is 2%, you're running at 150% of what you want it to be, maybe a 175% depending on the day and the month. Come on, that is not a good argument to make. And then when you go out and say, no, I was handed something from 9%, not only can people say, well, okay, we know that the goal, and let's be clear, not everybody is economically savvy, so they don't know that the Fed likes to have a 2% inflation rate because they just want to increase the GDP year over year. Rather than having a 0% inflation rate or even deflation for certain products, we always want to run at a 2% inflation rate. It helps the GDP numbers look good. It helps with getting investment from other people. The stock market constantly goes up, so it gives everybody a slight feeling of good. There are other economic reasons behind it, but that would be the politics of it, the looks of it, so to speak. But not everybody knows that. Fair enough. But you know that inflation is still high, and it is higher than it's been during your lifetime, because normally you see your egg prices go up by 2% a year max. Now you're seeing at the very beginning or towards the middle of Biden's presidency in like 2022, so about a year and a bit in, you're seeing them go up by 9%. So if you used to pay $1, now you're paying $1.09 for a box of eggs. And if that's happening month over month, not good whatsoever. So Biden's messaging here that, yes, I was just handed this. Even if you're not the most politically adept or economically adept citizen, it feels as though he's just trying to shift the blame. He's saying, oh, no, I can't, I was just given this. I can't do anything about it. Even though we've done a little bit here, a little bit there, you have a goal. Most people who are politically engaged know what that goal is, but most people in the real world at least have some understanding of what should be happening, which is prices should not be jacking up as much as they are. So you're not even fixing the problem and saying, that's why we're feeling this pain, because I was handed something hard, but we fixed it. No, you're saying, I was handed something hard, we haven't fixed the pain, but we're kind of close, but I was handed something hard. You can use the argument that I was handed a terrible situation, and that's why you're feeling this pain. And let's be clear, that may not be politically savvy, because you don't want the people that you want to go out and vote for you to feel any sort of pain. But I think you could at least make that argument better, saying, hey, this is why we had to do this. I was handed something. It was hard, but I took the leadership position and I said, we are going to jack up these interest rates. We're not going to worry about unemployment for right now. We are going to get inflation under lock and key. We're going to get it back down to that 2%. So every single person, every single mom, every single dad, every single college student who has to pay their own way through college, buying their own food, does not have to take on these exorbitant costs. Now, he would argue there's a little bit of greedflation in there, but once again, all of these things are mechanisms to remove responsibility from what he can do. Whether or not how you like how the Fed system operates, how they directly interfere in the markets. If the tools are there and you're not using them and you claim to want to fix it and you're okay with using those tools because you already are using them to some degree in order to lower inflation, why not do the job correctly? So let's continue with another quote from the article. Quote, after that, inflation increased. I need to back up a little bit, give a little bit more context. He's wrong about inflation, which is a measure or measured by the Consumer Price Index. It rose from 1.4% year over year in January 2021, the month that Biden became president. After that, inflation increased almost every month until reaching 9.1% in June 2022, its highest level in about 40 years. From there, an annual rate of inflation trended down for a year, reaching about 3% in June 2023, but it has since remained above 3% and was at 3.5% for 12 months, ending in March, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So you could see here the 9% quote, hey, at least it did hit 9% at one point in his administration. At least he wasn't just saying a random number. I give him credit. He is lucid. You gotta give him his wins where you can with Joe Biden. Actually, I take that back. If you've made it to this point, you obviously either think this is interesting or you care enough about my opinion. Always give the benefit of the doubt to any politician, to any person in general. So if you believe something is done in malice, give them the benefit of the doubt. You say, no, maybe it was just their good-hearted nature, but we need to correct their bad policy. But the other thing is when they do have good policy, whether it's Trump, whether it's Biden, whether it's Gavin Newsom, whether it is Abbott or anybody else that you can think of, when they do something right, give them a pat on the back. Even if you don't agree with a majority of the other things. If you have 100 things in a bill that you don't like, you go through and you say, okay, hey, these 100 things, no, we don't want them. They're bad. But then that one thing that you do like, you say, hey, thank you for doing that. When the CHIPS Act came out, even though I did have some problems with it, and I still have some questions about how it's going to impact our relationship with China, I think the overall picture about taking China more seriously and trying to make these different infrastructure areas that China has been crushing us in for a long time, especially in chip manufacturing, if we're going to intervene in the market, that's one of the places that if you listen long enough, you know that's one of my soft spots. So you could at least make the argument there, and I gave Biden the credit, and I said, hey, okay, good stuff. And now I'm over here criticizing him, and I don't want to pretend that it's all bad, okay? There are some good things that each person, each president does, each politician does, and you don't have to like everything about them, but at least give them that credit. And the reason I say that is because, and the reason I brought up the malice point, is because here, I don't think Joe Biden is genuinely sitting there with the interviewer saying, how can by the way, I'm stroking my chin. How can I fool the voter? No, he was given the 9% number because it was a real number that happened during his presidency. And he was probably told, hey, the talking point is 9% inflation was something that happened during my administration, or at least this was something that we had to deal with during my administration. And now we've gotten it down to 3%. And guess what? In his old politician way, or an extra briefing came in saying, hey, we want to try to pin that bad economy on Trump. He just pinned the 9% number on Trump. I'm not trying to say he's out there manipulating things. I am attributing a little bit of dumbery, a little bit of Dumb and Dumber kind of movie vibes to it, which is just made a mistake. Okay. And if he is trying to do this with malice and he's trying to manipulate the public by giving false information, then I don't want it to happen. I think it's terrible, but also there's somebody above who will judge that when he goes up there. Hopefully not in a long time. I hope that Joe Biden lasts as long as possible, especially while he is at the helm of our nation. But someone else will judge those sort of things when he goes up there. And I'm going to just sit here and say, hey, no, you're wrong. Let's move on, not harp on it too much. But you know who is harping on the economic message a lot? People like, the Morning Joe crew. And they talk about, hey, why do people not feel how good the economy is and things like that? And I pulled up an article from Crooks and Liars, and the headline reads this: why do Americans believe we're in a recession? And knowing Crooks and Liars, I don't read them as often as I read some other news outlets, but I do enjoy some of their coverage. I think they go a little bit hard on corporate executives. I think that they're pretty good when calling out government overreach, but just like how I have my little soft spot for China and the Taiwan issue, they have their soft spot for some progressive issues. So they can be a little bit leaning left sometimes, which, let's be clear, news outlets are going to do what news outlets are going to do, but it can sometimes, warp their perspective. But when I read this, I thought they were being sarcastic because that's normally Crooks and Liars' tone. Then again, they're different writers, but they're a little bit sarcastic, like, I read it as, why do Americans believe they're in a recession? I was like, so they're finally going to call out the fact that this economy is not good, that there actually was a recession during Joe Biden's time, at least by the normie definition, which is 2 quarters of downward growth. It was Q1, Q2 in 2022, I believe. I did look it up beforehand just to make sure I wasn't crazy. But you can find that on the government websites. I think it was the BEA.gov that had the chart of historic GDP growth. We had 2 quarters of negative, and I finally thought, okay, hey, Crooks and Liars, they're finally calling out these people. They're saying, no, hey, maybe people believe that we're in a recession currently because we were in a recession previously because their pocketbooks are getting hurt, but no. They take a different tact. And I'm going to read this first paragraph a little bit slow. Maybe I had a hard time reading it because I'm dumb, but I want to make sure that you get the first point that's getting across. Quote, first, let's point out how little the media has done to dispute this belief, which is totally a result of hypnotic repetition by the Queen's used car salesman. You can't ignore disinformation for years and then credibly say, quote, where did that come from? Morning Joe takes a shot this morning. So you may be thinking, okay, that doesn't necessarily help me out. Let's jump to the last paragraph. Quote, how the media refuses to acknowledge the effects of Trump's constant claim that the economy is in shambles under Biden is a failure of the media, which hasn't done its job. The whole, look at that reaction is a disgrace. So maybe with that little bit of context, they are not actually saying, oh, no. Hey, Morning Joe, when people are actually feeling the pain for their egg prices, when they're asking the questions of why are all my costs going up, the Crooks and Liars, which is meant to speak truth to power, which is meant to call out the elites, at least they do it for one side or the other, but literally in the name, Crooks and Liars. It is obviously implied that they are talking about elites, they're talking about politicians, they're talking about people within, if you're looking at it through their worldview, people who are in places of power and how they do not tell the truth and how they are trying to be corrupt and they are trying to make sure that they come out on top rather than the average people. That is obviously their name. And then to pretend as though inflation is not hurting people, to pretend as though the message from one particular group, aka a lot of media organizations, that the economy is not as bad as you think it is, and trying to make people pretend that they do not feel what they feel economically. If that is not the largest sort of lie, if that doesn't make you a liar, if that doesn't make you a crook who can still afford to go and grab your fancy steak at one of the New York restaurants, all the New York Times article writers who probably hobnob with the senators or House members when they come up north, they go out to a steakhouse, put it on an expense account. Then again, I don't know if their expense accounts still existed. They might have gotten rid of them during the restructuring, but that was a major thing during the 90s and 2000s. They would put a lot of things just on an expense account whenever they would go out to fancy dinners, and they could get away with it. Maybe those people don't feel it, but the average person does. And even if the average person can't go through and have an Excel spreadsheet that breaks everything down and says exactly how much more they spend, they know what they make. They know what they normally have week after week, and they know that they're probably not putting as much into a college savings account for their children. And let's be clear, this is why I asked for the anecdotal evidence at the beginning, because I am just coming into the labor force now. I have joined the labor force with a proper job, not a internship, not a summer job, a proper paying job, a good paying job. And I'm not bragging, I'm just saying, under this economy. So I don't know what anything else looks like. I don't know what trying to keep up with costs looks like besides under a Joe Biden economy versus a Trump economy versus a random middle person economy. Let's say Bill Clinton or a Reagan economy. I don't have that sort of context. So for me, I only really have my now basis. I wasn't paying as many bills when I was making less money in high school and during college under a Trump presidency. So once again, I don't necessarily have the framework to actually look at it. But these people, everyday people, when you start to tell them, hey, no, these numbers are looking really good. I promise you that this spreadsheet says the economy is doing great. Sure, macro, maybe it may look amazing. That doesn't mean that people are feeling it. And even if people are making more money, but they have to pay more for the stuff that they want, they can still afford it. They still have the same margin. They're still seeing about the same amount of money in the bank. That's still distressing to them because guess what? When they got that pay raise, they're saying, oh, yeah, okay, this is great. I used to have $500 in the bank after expenses, and now I'll have like $700 or $800 for the week. And guess what? They're looking at it, they're saying, oh, wait, wow, I got that pay raise and I still got the same thing in the bank afterwards. What's going on? And even if they're able to survive, even if their wages are keeping up with inflation, guess what? You have expectations. You have how somebody feels about the situation that you have to deal with. And when Crooks and Liars comes in here and says, oh, yeah, the media hasn't been hard enough on this message. Are you freaking insane? Oh, wait, no, that's not their problem. Their problem is Donald Trump. And they're saying, oh, the media hasn't been combating his narrative enough. Maybe they haven't been combating his narrative enough because people agree with him. Whether or not he is 100% right, and let's be clear, he has been very bombastic, he has been very hyperbolic, and sometimes he has mischaracterized some of the policies of the Biden administration to benefit himself. There's no doubt about that. But when he says that people are feeling it right now, and it was a different economy under Trump, not only is that backed up by truth, because it was a different economy under Trump, and the pocketbook was not held as tightly in order to survive under the Donald Trump presidency, but also just look at the polling. Whether or not I like polling, when it comes to horse race polling, political polling, it's not necessarily the most accurate. But when you're asking subjective feelings, like feeling polling, I'm pretty sure most people can pretty accurately describe how they feel, whether or not they're influenced by outside factors. There's no doubt about that. If a lot of people watch a lot of Fox News, their perception of the economy is going to be much worse than the person who watches MSNBC or CNN, or someone like me who listens to both sides and says, no, this inflation, or just looks at the overall numbers and says, yeah, no, this inflation does suck. Now, the unemployment is very low, which means a lot of people are being able to probably keep up with the inflation, or at least not getting trapped in a cycle of debt creation, even though which is ironic, I say that, even though the credit card rates, amount of credit card debt went over $1 trillion for the first time in the last 2 years. So that may be some factor of it. But no, the Crooks and Liars, they don't want to take any of that into account. They don't want to say, hey, this polling tells us one particular thing. They're saying, no. This lie, this Trump lie is contorting everybody's mind. No, I had hope for this article. I really did. I thought that Crooks and Liars, a organization that's a little bit more progressive, was finally going to sit down and say, hey, remember when all the media said, hey, no, we're not in a recession? Remember when the White House technically changed, or at least did not acknowledge the old definition of a recession when the numbers came out about the 2/4 of GDP decrease? And everybody kind of, they buzzed over it. Oh, are we in a recession? No, okay, no big deal. No. By the old definition of recession, we were in a recession. If you want to make an argument, and yes, I understand the economic argument is, well, that a recession comes with this large amount of inflation, while also a certain amount of job loss, so on and so forth, I understand that you could make a lot of technical definitions, but guess what? Because anybody could look at the metrics a little bit differently and make an argument in economics, because guess what? There are going to be tons of theories as to why certain things happen, because the economy is a very complex mechanism that we are trying to interfere in directly as a U.S. government, as the Fed. But hey, sorry, I'm getting a little bit off track there. The whole idea is that there are so many different mechanisms that you could technically work your way around to describing the recession as being this or not this, because of this, because of not this. Well, okay, well, our inflation's up, but our unemployment is looking strong. Well, our inflation and our unemployment are, a little bit middling, but hey, we can still look at the amount of imports and exports, and they're still high. Like, you could find different ways to validate things, and that's why we had the very simple definition of 2 quarters of GDP decline. There you go, recession. Now look at that. That's a pretty simple definition, even if it's not the most technically accurate thing. Guess what? We had a recession by that definition, and that's why, no, terms got to change. Couldn't have a recession under Biden, even if it was the most mild recession ever, because you look at the GDP growth after that, and it levels out pretty darn quickly. Also, what Biden's been doing this whole time is comparing the United States to other countries. Go back to that time, say, hey, yeah, we were in a mild recession. Look how fast we recovered. Look at every other economy that went into either full-fledged recession or at least had a hard economic downturn. Compare our numbers to theirs, so on and so forth. But no. Nope. Hey, recession, gone. And Crooks and Liars won't even take the time to mention it. And I was really hoping they would. Because with the headline, like, why do Americans believe we're in a recession, and their knack for going up and punching politicians in the nose figuratively, I thought, okay, hey, maybe they're going to call it out. Maybe they're going to talk about the baloney that comes out of the mouths of some of these people and, acknowledge the truth. But no, of course not. Got to fall in line. Got to, just pull the line for one side or the other. Hey, okay. Sorry, I got frustrated. That's enough on that one. Let's jump to our final article that comes from Real Clear Politics. State Department Atheist grant may have been misused. Atheism grant. And when I first read this, I was very intrigued. So I'm going to read a little bit of the middle section, and then I'm going to give my own thoughts, because to pretend as though that we could cover this entire thing properly with all the due diligence that it needs would be idiotic of me. Quote, for more than a year, the trio has been investigating the decision-making, so it's a trio of congressmen who are doing a little bit of, investigative work behind the scenes to see if the money is being appropriated properly. Quote, the decision-making behind the State Department's, so they've been investigating the decision-making behind the State Department's April 2021 solicitation bid for a $500,000 grant titled Promoting and Defending Religious Freedom, Inclusive of Atheism, Humanist, and Non-Practicing and Non-Affiliate Individuals. The agency awarded the grant to Humanist International, or HI, an organization aimed at promoting humanism, an outlook, and a system of thought attaching prime importance to human effort rather than divine or supernatural powers. So whether or not you like humanism, whether or not you like anything that could be associated with atheistic practices, I want to pull back and say, is this the proper purview of the United States government? Yes, no, maybe. You could make an argument that why are we giving out money to these organizations to promote themselves around the world? If they want to go out there and be a humanist organization, if they want to go out there and do their mission trips as a Christian organization, if they want to go out there and sponsor different trips for people who are part of the Islamic faith, and they have their journey from Mecca to Medina, I believe is what it's properly called. If you want to sponsor that, why are we giving grants to companies and organizations that should be doing this on their own? I think that is one approach that you could definitely take. I think that's probably the better one when it comes to a more libertarian and government hands-off policy. Why would you give money to any organization promoting anything like this? Then again, you could make an argument that they are spreading knowledge. They're spreading not necessarily a belief system, but a way of viewing the world that could very well help some people in these other nations change the culture there or alter the way that they interact in life and how successful they may be. Because if they have a certain belief system or they only have a certain particular knowledge about how the world works, and you provide a new system of learning, you provide a different perspective, even one that may be a little bit more Western. People probably wouldn't like that nowadays. They say, "Hey, no. If you're bringing your Western thoughts over here, we can't be having that." Or at least people in the West would say, "Hey, you can't bring those thoughts over there." But at the end of the day, it's not necessarily about indoctrinating people with Western beliefs or a particular belief system. It's about providing them with the tools in order to uplift themselves, uplift their nation, uplift their family, so on and so forth. So I think you could make an argument on that front. I would still err on the side of government doesn't have to do that, but okay, whatever. And then there's the final question, which is, okay, so we can't give money to any religious organizations, basically. That is what the government's main issue is going to be here, because if we can't give money to other religious organizations to do their work around the world, we couldn't technically give it to a belief system like atheism or anything that would promote atheism, because that is seen as a sort of religion, and it's classified under similar things. Similar statutes as a sort of religion, and we couldn't promote the spread of only that religion. We could promote the talking about of those ideas along with others, but not the, oh, hey, this is the atheistic practice. This is how we go through the tenets of atheism. Hey, this is how you would spread it to your friends. This is how you would talk about those sort of things that would actually be promoting it. We would take issue. And this is where the separation of church and state argument has become so exasperating, because guess what? You could just have an inverse policy. Instead of a policy that says, hey, we won't promote any religion or we won't promote any this, that, or the other, how about you have an inverse policy that says, hey, well, if you're going to be involved in this anyway, well, let's be clear, I think they're not going to be involved. But if they are going to be involved, why not have a policy that says, hey, we will provide funding to any sort of religious organization? Guess what? Because religious organizations are actually very often categorized as nonprofits. So you could just say a religious nonprofit. Sure, you could just throw in a special category because they already technically exist, at least in the tax code. So you could at least make that designation come over to the federal government and say, hey, for religious nonprofits, we will provide these grants here and they can spread their message. And the only restriction you put on it is that if they spread a message that directly calls for the harm of individuals, or there has been any terrible, and let's be clear, you would have to be very specific about this, if there have been any incidences, crimes, violences committed by that particular organization. So if, it may be a little tricky, because if a Presbyterian church somewhere in Minnesota does something where a parishioner does something terrible, would that affect every single Presbyterian church? Would it just be that one that they're affiliated with? That would be an important question. But why is promoting faith, or even just these sort of ideologies, this sort of, I don't want to call atheism as a religion, call it a religion, even though technically could be there. It's complicated. The new atheism movement, it's complicated. But my point being, why not? Okay, especially if you're talking Christianity, if you're talking even Judaism, if you're talking, I could make a good argument for Buddhism. Hinduism, I think there is definitely value in that system as well. And guess what? It's not like you're going over to those places and forcing it upon them. They still have free will. You're just like a missionary, bringing your message to them. So I don't necessarily see why that would necessarily be a bad thing. And the reason I say this is because a lot of religions have important factors in them. Some of them are crazy, and some of them ask people to do crazy things. There are cult religions. Guess what? That's why you have that provision that says if they advocate for any sort of violence, if they cause any sort of violence or any exploitation of the people involved, then yeah, you could, declassify them and say, hey, they don't get the money. But a lot of different religions have important aspects that help secure people against certain parts of life that are very difficult. And obviously, as a person who is Christian, I would be very okay with Christian money that is oriented towards Christian organizations being given as grants and then them using it to go out and do their missions across the world. Be more than happy with that. But I also know there are some core tenets of Islam And I think the service and duty aspects, especially within that religion, are something that could be spread. There are other aspects I have lots of problems with. And guess what? There are going to be lots of NGOs that go around the world and go out and do things. And if you're going to have a policy, and if you're going to do something where, hey, if you're going to be mealy-mouthed about it, either don't do it at all or allow it and say, hey, well, we're going to have special provisions around it, but we're not endorsing this religion and giving them money. We are just providing money to these NGOs that want to have a humanitarian message and spread something that they believe that could improve people's lives. Once again, I honestly think that the last argument is pretty tenuous, because why should the money be going out the door anyway to that? NGOs can raise money from people in lots of different ways. Why do we have to give them grants? Then again, I understand that you could make an interesting argument about building bonds within a nation and trying to strengthen our ties there. Guess what? You could just say, instead of giving out a grant, you could just hire an NGO or a different organization, and you could just say, okay, hey, we're going to bring you in on a consultant. We've created a task force where we want to increase our ties in XYZ country, and we believe that your way of doing it, that talking about humanistic ideas is something that is devoid of religion. So I'm saying, humanistic ideas, connecting with people, providing them the resources to learn about these sort of philosophies that are more Western based, or at least are present in the way that Americans think, and then hire them as consultants and go do that. But why do you have to give them grants? I think that, yes, my latter argument about, hey, give money to everybody. If you're going to do it, give money to everybody. Yes, it's tenuous, no doubt. I would much prefer that we don't give out the money. But it is a serious question. Why do we have to be so afraid? We're so afraid of saying, okay, hey, we're going to give money to religious organizations, because for some reason, giving money, if you do it equally to everybody who's nonviolent, who's preaching something or talking about something that is a good message, that in doing that, you're tacitly endorsing them. You're saying, oh, this is a state religion. Come on. It's numbskulled, okay? And this has created many legal carve-outs that I've talked about before, which are very, very interesting. And our aversion to even talk about faith or have any sort of connection with it has left some teachers, and never mind. If you want to hear about that, there's an episode, it's probably somewhere around the 240 mark, about a teacher who basically is not protected by certain labor laws because of the fact that she works for the a certain church school. So yeah, go listen to that one. It's very interesting. We really do have a massive aversion to even talking about these sort of things, because people are deadly afraid of being associated or having the United States be called like a religious state or something like that, or they believe it's against our core tenets, when obviously our founders did believe at least in something larger than ourselves. And that's why I think that the argument could be made for anything that advocates for something larger than ourselves could be within the purview of the American experience, because, they said our creator. It may not necessarily be the Christian God. It may not be the Islam God, the Muslim God. The Islamic God. Goodness gracious. It may not be the Jewish God. It may not be the 130 different gods in Hinduism. I'm pretty sure there are more than that, but those are the ones I can remember off the top of my head. It may not be the universe, as Buddha would probably put it, even though it's not necessarily like that. It's his. Never mind. We're not going to go into all the different participation. But my point being that could still fall within the American purview. But no. We are deathly afraid of religion, even though the reason the people who initially founded this religion, started this society, came to America was for religious freedom. And yet we are somehow, for some reason, afraid to even have these conversations. But that's enough on that. I went on a really long rant. I'm sorry this one came out this is going to be like a 40-minute episode. I don't think I've done a 40-minute episode for a long time. I'm sorry, but there were just lots of topics I really wanted to cover. So let's get to our last thing. It's our daily delight. And this one comes from paradepets.com. Quote, golden retrievers have a playdate party, and it's the best kind of chaos. And for anyone who has dealt with golden retrievers, who has had golden retrievers, who has had a play date with multiple golden retrievers, yes, it is true. It is absolutely chaotic. And in this article, they describe a post from TikTok by the user, Joey, how you doing? I mean, for all you Friends fans out there, that's probably going to make you laugh. And it's describing / showing the party that his golden retriever is having with all the others. It's honestly pretty darn adorable. So if you want to check out this daily delight, put a smile on your face, or you want to read any of today's articles, they'll all be linked in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Casts, Google Podcasts, which I have been notified is officially going to stop giving out analytics and working here soon, as well as the link to Podvine is down there. And the Twitter tirade, where I do a little short segment. You can find that with the Twitter handle that is down in that description, Your Daily Flip. Or Your Daily Flip Podcast? Your Daily Flip. I'm very, very stupid. So, you know what? I'm just going to end my embarrassment. With all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.